Okay, hi Ben. Right, Ed back in. So Ben's just joined a thing. Iris has joined. Michelle, hi Dylan. You guys are coming into our session. So we're a bit under pressure now, Ed. There's actually a few people watching, so we better kick off.
And I think we they can hear us, so maybe we have kicked off.
Oh, look at that! I've even turned my light on, which is great. Even more. All right. Well, look, let's sort of kick this off, and hopefully, as you guys welcome in, do say hi in the chat session. We'd love to sort of see you and have a chat about any questions that you guys. Thanks, Ben. We're all looking good. Thank you very much. The idea being, I think both what Ed and I truly believe in here is actually a fully interactive session. So, if there are questions that you guys want to put to us in the chat bot, please do that, and we'll bring them in live into this discussion and happily sort of discuss them through. So this session is entitled "The Importance of Choosing PropTech." I mean, it's so broad, it's unbelievable, which is going to be, I think, probably quite difficult to contain to a 20-25 minute discussion that we're going to have here. But I hope we give you quite a wide-reaching session, and really for sort of those of you to understand, I think what we're trying to track here. We're going to start on a macro level of understanding how PropTech is developing at the moment. I'm going to ask sort of Ed and I will probably have a little bit of a discussion around all that look and how that's looking. And then we'll probably focus in a little bit more in terms of where Malcomm's speciality, or one of their specialities, is going to be around the retail sector, to give you probably an insight into one of the sectors which is not talked about an awful lot. And so I hope that's of use for you as well. So without further ado, Ed, do you want to just give us an idea as to what Malcomm does, what they do, just for the users at home, and no more than 30 seconds. You can't.
Yeah, you told me that, James. So I'll be very strict with myself. So cheers, James. Thanks very much, and welcome everybody to the session. So Malcomm is a digital property management platform, and we are operating across all asset classes, so retail, office, and residential, working with clients globally in the UK, Europe, North America, and Asia. And our whole reason for being is to help our clients create efficiencies in the management of their buildings through our enterprise software. Is that 30 seconds?
I think actually, yes, I think you probably did that then. But it's obviously a very important area at the minute. And I think, it's something that we're certainly seeing as sort of being an area that has got a lot of passion for people to understand the management of their buildings. So, no doubt you guys are having, hopefully, a bit of a field day, so we'll come down.
Well, we are certainly having successes, and we're working. Despite being a pretty small business that was originally set up in the kind of small office appendage to the founder's farmhouse, one of those kind of out of a garage type stories. We're working with some of the biggest listed and private commercial real estate companies in the world. People like Unibail Rodamco, Westfield, and Oxford, and Savills, and Cushman, and British Lands. So it's quite an exciting story for the UK.
And you can do a lot from a farmhouse, as I'm testament to.
Yeah, I know. That's obviously it. PropTech from farmhouses. Maybe that's the TV show.
It's a new trend. That's what we should develop. But actually, with that in mind, I mean, your role is a growth director, right? So what just first and foremost, what the hell is a growth director?
Yeah, well, it's I spend quite a lot of my day panicking, James, about where growth is going to come from. Worse than that, it's a global growth director. Yeah. I'm operating out of not farmhouse, unfortunately, but my office appended to my little cottage in West Berkshire, about 60 miles west of London. So doing a global job from your laptop is definitely challenging. But my role basically is to grow Malcomm globally and also across different asset classes. So as a business, we originated in retail, but we are increasingly working with clients across office, residential, and retail, and indeed airports. So some news on that soon, but pretty excited about that, and transport too. So we're doing increasingly working with some of the transport providers to introduce our solution into their environment. So there's a huge market opportunity. By the end of this financial year, we'll be operating at about 450 assets globally, but our ambitions are to increase that tenfold over the next 5-6 years.
Sure. So growth is going well. Well, look, let's just sort of start in terms of what the session is really about, which is talking about the importance of PropTech. I don't think there's been a more important time to consider PropTech in this sense. So your perspectives to start with, really on this sort of global market, the importance of it. What's going on really in that field.
Well, I think you're right. I think we've seen companies start to wake up to the importance of digitizing their operations, whether it's property management or leasing or investments, and or on the development side, construction side as well. So clearly, property companies that have historically perhaps been on the more conservative side of the broader economy are starting to wake up to this. I believe in the last couple of years, it may even be your data, James, about $20 billion has been invested in PropTech companies globally. So it is a fast expanding market. What we are seeing, though, is that although there is an appetite to invest in companies and an appetite for companies to invest in their operations, it's not just about money, it's a cultural change within these businesses. So what I'm just kind of describing is our AII. There has to be an advocate within the business to take it forward, or an appetite to change, because it is cultural as much as it is about investment.
Yeah.
Those advocates have to have an appetite for risk, because it is a change in behavior. So it's not just about doing things differently, it's about also changing teams within the business. And in order for PropTech companies to persuade clients that that's the right thing to do, we need to embed everything that we are talking about in intelligence and insight. So it's no longer good enough just to go to the chief exec of a big property company or a big agency and say, you must invest in technology, everybody else is. They want to know, what's my return on investment going to be from this change in the way that we do things, which will require some money as well. So we are focused, squarely on that. I think the second point to make is that people want better connected places, not just the buildings in which they are working, but the connectivity between the buildings where they work, the places where they live, the environments where they enjoy their leisure time. And that's never been more important, despite the last 6 months and the impact of COVID-19. So I think the forecasts were for about 2.5 billion more people globally to live in urban centres by 2050. About 80-90% of that was probably in Asia and Africa, but nonetheless, that's still a significant number of people living in urban centres. Whether that number will be quite the same forecast after the last 6 months, who knows? I mean, I know politicians love to talk about the fact that this is an unprecedented time that we are in, but we also know that it's not at all unprecedented. There have been plenty of similar situations where people have migrated out of cities. And obviously, our politicians can't remember the Milan plague of 1570, James, but I'm sure that you can.
Of course, absolutely. I was all over that Milan plague.
I thought you were. I mean, you must have been kind of in short shorts. It happened. And about 20% of Milan's population left the city, huge financial crisis as a consequence of that, and then it had to rebuild itself. So cities are resilient, places are resilient. People want to be connected to urban centres and to people. So lots of these concepts are now evolving in kind of cities narrative, around 20-minute cities in Melbourne, 15-minute cities in Paris, 15 minutes or 20 minutes by cycling or walking. So having all those amenities near you, your workplace near you, and where you live near you. So I think better connectivity and how technology can support that better connectivity in terms of the operation of buildings and also communication between people, whether it's at work or within the block of flats that they might live, or access to different services. And then finally, the third point is property management within a fairly conservative sector that commercial real estate is a fairly mundane activity, right? So it's quite administrative, requires quite a lot of human resource. And so what we are keen to continue to exploit is a move away from property management as a fairly mundane administrative task to one where property managers can remove that from their day-to-day operations through the use of technology and focus more on strategy, on creativity, on using data to make better informed decisions about how businesses operate, how buildings work. So they're my three kind of thoughts about the macro, the bigger picture side of things.
Yeah, and I think we can't avoid talking about COVID at the minute. I mean, it's obviously on the lips of everybody. I mean, it will eventually pass. I think people are now realizing it's not going to be a quick fix. It's not going to be a 6-month fix. We're going to be transitioning for an awful long time. And I don't know if it's the same for you, but I'm already hearing the stories continually of people moving out of cities now because they've experienced one lockdown in their small flat and they didn't like it. And they've moved. We're going to have that. That's not going to be a quick fix for human migration within cities and countryside. I think it's only going to accelerate now, but it's we're looking at a 6-month to a 3 to 5 year move, I think, here, just because of this massive shock that we've all seen as a system. But just, I mean, sort of going, before we sort of delve into the sort of the detail around the retail trends that we're seeing, because I'm particularly interested in your perceptions of, now you've given us that macro level, let's have a look at the sort of micro level with, in particular, the sort of the retail sector that you're seeing and the global trends, because I don't think it's been discussed enough, in my view. I think we're talking a lot about the way that, you know, return to work in the commercial sector. And I think we've talked a lot about how the residential sector is adapting. We've just done it now there for a second. But I think then an understanding of how that's going to impact the retail sector, I don't think it's really been discussed, because I'm not sure that many people understand it fully. But to sort of bring up on some points that you raised earlier on about these sort of macro trends, just some stats and sort of facts really of what the global market is currently doing. I'm just going to jump into a screen share here. So can you just let me know if you see it for me?
I can, yeah.
All right. So I had some great fun in the last couple of days doing a sort of some keynotes on some other virtual conferences, and this was one from yesterday in Africa. Just looking at the number of PropTech companies. So there's 130 currently in Africa. There's over 2,000 currently in America. You talk about this managed stage of the building being quite important, but actually it's quite prosaic. You know, 41% of all the American firms are focusing on the property management side of it all. 800 plus companies out of Asia, which is obviously quite an interesting stat. And it's probably one of the least transparent markets that we're seeing, moving into the European market with over 2,000. So, you know, there's an awful lot of activity going on out there. And there's probably about 8,000 PropTech companies globally at the minute. Now, just sort of taking that into a little bit more sort of granularity, just to sort of form some narrative on which sorts of technologies are currently being used. This is just a comparison for the businesses that were set up between 2008 and 2018 and the 2019-20 businesses here on the right-hand side. And it's really been an interesting perspective of looking at how the attitudes have shifted around the technology that PropTech is believing is important. So if you look at the previous 10 years, you know, data analytics and big data were very important, and they are still important now. But you've got some real interesting moves of what I would call the businesses that are creating the data that drives the analytics and the big data. So things like Internet of Things, you'll see has dropped from 10% down to only 6% of businesses created. Smart buildings, smart homes. Aside from smart buildings, they've really dropped off the map in terms of creating new companies, which suggests to me that there's a sort of an over prevalence of companies in that creation of data, whereas the analysis of the data is still incredibly important, but also equally how to analyze the data. So AI was only about 5, nearly 6% of businesses back in the last 10 years. It's now growing as one of the fastest growing sectors in terms of taking the data and analyzing the data, which I certainly think is now going to support over the next sort of few years' time. So that's sort of some of the overriding macro trends that we're starting to see on the sector as a whole. So let's just sort of go into what are the barriers that you feel are sort of stopping this adoption of PropTech, if any?
Well, I'm interested in your view on this as well, James. I mean, going back to what I said earlier on about the importance of cultural change as much as money available to invest in technology. You know, some of the stuff that you just put up on the screen then reinforces that, I think. So it is all very well collecting lots of data, but without the right tools and the right people in your business to turn that data into insight and knowledge, and actually it's just a whole load of information that's, you've got a huge database of stuff, but unless you can turn it into business decisions, and actually it's almost not worth having.
So are you saying that one of the potential barriers here is simply an understanding and an interpretation?
Well, and I'm interested in your perspective, but the speed at which companies are able to change the skills and the capabilities of the people within their business relative to the speeds at which they can collect data. So we can go to a client tomorrow and say to them, here's the platform, we'll set it up for you in a few weeks. You can start collecting data on consumer sales, on tenant performance, on FM companies. You can do that tomorrow. But actually, in order to be able to make the most of that information that we can provide you, you need the right people. Well, in order to do that, you've got to have a proper kind of commitment to recruitment and recruiting different people, or the people that you've got internally, you need to give them the skills and tools that they might not have. And say some of the professional bodies and industry bodies and universities have all got to be kind of brought into this.
Yeah, certainly. I think you're absolutely bang on. Human capital, it's something that we feel that there's actually going to be a movement both ways in that trend, which is the property industry, the traditional industry needs to bring on more sort of PropTech, or I shouldn't say PropTech, because actually in our experience of what we're seeing is that actually it's general tech coming in. And it's not just about being, a CTO, because actually, as far as I'm concerned, that doesn't mean anything. But what we're starting to see, and I think we need to encourage it more, is more transformation specialists from other industries that have gone through a period of digital transformation. Because PropTech is a crappy little phrase, which really we shouldn't be talking about, because it's about digital transformation. So the skill set, I think, is around transformational change in industry, and that's going to be a prevalent role. And we're starting to see it. We are starting to see sort of heads of innovation coming in, and heads of transformation, heads of change, and those are the roles I think which are sort of be primarily focused. But
and then sorry to interrupt, but then on the kind of even more grandiose level, how does the commercial real estate sector attract itself to the kinds of people that you might be talking about coming out of the best universities in the world? Because actually, historically, those people might not have wanted to go into commercial real estate, because what is the value, the broader socioeconomic value of commercial real estate? How do people perceive the industry? And generally speaking, it isn't very positive. Generally speaking, they probably think about architects or estate agents. Architects well respected, estate agents, unfortunately, not so much. Probably just after politicians in the list of least respected.
But that's still a mentality thing, right? And I think you're absolutely right about the academical side, because I remember giving a lecture to one of the most prestigious sort of real estate universities in the UK, but also globally. And I came out of that lecture to the lecturers about this innovation sort of period that we're going in. And he took me to one side over lunch and just said, "Look, James," he said, "thank you for doing that." He said, "But I teach a module on valuation." And he said, "What you've just done is completely ruined my entire module. And I don't even know why I'm doing it. I don't even know why I'm lecturing it on it anymore, because no one wants to know about how to value a building traditionally. It's no longer relevant." And that is a problem. And I think academic institutions have a duty of care to their next generation coming through to say, well, this is what's happening in the real estate space. It's not like it has always been. So, it's a good point. But look, I'm just conscious of time, because one of the things I really do want to do is I do want to have this discussion about sort of in particular retail. What are you finding at the moment are the sort of the key trends impacting the retail sector, given what this sort of shockwave of COVID? But I think it's probably only hastened what was already happening.
I think some people are saying that. They're saying that what would have taken 30 years to transform and to evolve has happened in kind of 6 months, at least in terms of people's thinking. Buildings are, after all, buildings. Leases are leases. Valuation models are valuation models. The planning system is what it is. So these things don't happen quickly. But at people's realization that they need to happen faster has definitely been hastened by COVID. So looking pre-COVID, the reality was that retailers were consolidating their floor space. They did not need as much as they used to need to serve the same number of people that they now serve, right? So, to pinch a phrase of somebody else, the issue in retail isn't that we have overdeveloped retail floor space. The issue is that we are under demolished. So we haven't removed enough of the stock. We've just continued to overlay new stock. So there was this big narrative about the transformation of retail-led places into mixed-use destinations, and I think that will continue. And we'll probably get quicker. But also the kind of the counterfactual to that is that the margins that retailers make on online distribution and sales are significantly lower than they are through buildings. So retailers are having to work out the best way to service their customers through lots of these different routes. So 86% in the UK, which is a very mature online digital retail market, 86% of sales still require physical space in some way. So if you think about
that's actually quite a startling fact, isn't it?
And that's comparison goods retail. Convenience, it will be higher, and obviously leisure and hospitality higher still. So physical space is still the most preeminent route to market for retailers. Clearly, they're using everything that's going on.
Well, hang on, it's not really a route to market, is it? It's the end of market. It's the transactional aspect. They need some sense of servicing using the physical space.
Well, it definitely is. It definitely is part of their distribution, but it is also part of their brand, right? So lots of examples around the world where physical retail closes their stores. All of a sudden, because they believe that their online penetration within that postcode area or within that local town or city will be sufficient to serve their needs. But actually, a lot of people forget that the retailer exists because they don't see it on the high street when they're going to work or when they're taking the kids to school or whatever else it might be. So buildings offer the opportunity to create a brand experience as much as they do a distribution channel. And that's actually their competitive advantage, right? So buying through Amazon or another pretty much online only provider is a pretty utilitarian functional activity. It doesn't really play to your emotions or to your senses. It's very efficient. It's actually not even very much cheaper.
Well, but to put the comparison, it's exactly the same as these sort of virtual conferences, which is a utilitarian in the sense of they serve a purpose which is functional, but there's no emotional aspect to it all as well. So
where are the endorphins? There'll be some, but won't be enough. So actually that's the competitive advantage. Now, where the built environment has grown up in retail, has grown up without having to compete. The last 20 years, it's having to start to compete. So things are having to change, and so service levels and experience. I don't mean experience. People talk, and I hated the word. I never really understood it over the last couple of years. Experiential retail.
Oh, yes, of course.
You're either experiential or you're functional and convenience. Well, actually, I've never met somebody who goes to a shop or to a bar or to a restaurant or to the theatre and wants a bad experience. Everybody wants to be treated well. Everybody wants great experience. It's obviously relative to the offer. So I think a focus on the experience, a focus on stimulating those broader senses and the emotions that you have as a shopper when you're or a diner or a theatre goer when you go.
Sorry, Ed, can I just go back a step in that? Because I think there's a real importance to pin back to what this discussion is about, which is the importance of choosing PropTech. So do technology providers and provision augment that experiential aspect of the retail environment, or is it a human experience to a human? I'm interested in.
I don't think it's binary. So from a business perspective, an operations perspective, using property management platforms, for example, to create efficiencies in the way that you manage buildings is clearly about trying to find a way to maintain your sustainability as a business.
Yeah.
At a time when actually there's very little rental growth and the prospect of that, in fact, even before COVID was. So if you're going to continue to make money, you need to drive efficiencies, and our platform does that brilliantly. But it only augments we're not saying take human beings out of this relationship at all, far from it. It just means that actually the people responsible for developing those relationships within the building, within those spaces, can focus more of their time on building those relationships on a human level.
Yeah.
Because the other tasks, the mundane stuff that I was talking about at the beginning, have been taken away. Now, on the B2C side of what we do, actually, it certainly supplements the information and therefore the service and the enjoyment that you're going to get from a shop as a consumer, because you can do lots of research through it before you go. You can order before you go. You can book your table or your parking slot, or that you'll be able to access a building without having to touch it. And obviously, that's a big issue for people at the moment. So you can it's almost a kind of to prepare yourself tool, so that when you get there, you'll have the best experience that you can have. So it's definitely our technology, as you described eloquently, augments or supplements, supports human interaction, but does it in a way that means that the whole process is much more efficient.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's going to be the key point for everything moving forward with how technology, and in our case, this term PropTech, is going to work. Because I do think if we're going to get buy-in from both sides of the market, and an ability for the consumer ultimately to understand well, they may not even need to understand how technology is to use that term again, augmenting their experience. I think there needs to be some seamless interaction between the physical and the digital channels. That means that I think the best way of using technology is to make technology seem seamless, and therefore people don't even realize that technology is actually influencing the way that they're in their retail environment. So
well, it's a similar point to the point that you were making earlier on about definitions, and I know that you guys have done quite a lot of work on this, but PropTech is a definition that was created because of a need to define a new way of managing buildings, constructing buildings, leasing buildings.
Yeah.
It's not about PropTech. To your point, it's about digital transformation, and property. Technology should be at the core of property operations. It's a core competency. I know KPMG published some research recently, and the conclusion that they drew from that was that 45% of real estate businesses in the States thought that technology was a core competency of their operations. 26 in the UK, 17 in the Netherlands, and they were the highest, right? So that's 50% of real estate businesses at the very best think that it's a core competency. Clearly, what we all want to see is that 100% of businesses see it as a core competency, and then they build their businesses around that. So I think it's a little bit like that in retail. So people used to talk about multi-channel retail, then that sounded a little bit disjointed. So then it was omni-channel retail.
I remember omni-channel. That was well talked about.
Exactly, and that now feels a bit weird. We're basically talking about retailing, right? Yeah. And retailing is either to your point. It's the seamless interaction between the digital experience and the physical experience. And I don't say to myself, what I fancy doing today, an omni-channel retail shop, or I'm going to go an omni-channel pint in the pub. Consumers don't think like that.
Well, I don't mind the pint in the pub. I'd be quite happy just simply with a pint in the pub. But like with all that in mind, I think just very conscious of time, because I think we're allocated about 25 minutes, and I know there is so much more that we could go into on here. Certainly from an opinion basis, from a qualitative opinion, and I think from my side and all the work that we do around the quantitative analysis of actually what's happening, both sort of general but then specific in retail. There's so much we could do, so much we could go through, and it's probably not enough time. But with that in mind, Ed, thanks for the time in this.
We've got next week, I think, and we'll carry on.
We'll go through that. And Dave, you've just entered the session, man. You've just joined at the main point where we're just about to all leave. But I just want to sort of bring it back round to say, this is about the importance of choosing PropTech. And for me, really, yes, there is no better time to choose PropTech as an option for the real estate industry to go through. But remember, it's not about PropTech. This is digital transformation. It isn't going anywhere. The numbers dictate that. Yes, the peak PropTech, if we want to call that, of technology firms and suppliers being created was probably 2 or 3 years ago. In retail, it was 2015. There was nearly 100 companies that actually were created then. But they're dropping off now. And now what we need to do as an industry is not to reward the ideas, but actually reward the application of those ideas into practical steps that the industry can take. I know Malcomm have done that an awful lot. There's some great case studies that these guys have done, are actually about talking about how they're applying the technology to the provision of these buildings and suppliers. So, well worth doing all of that sort of stuff. And really, aside from that, thanks everybody. Thanks, Ed. That was enjoyable and great.
Cheers, James.
Ed, I'm going to phone you.
Yeah. We'll do, yeah.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers, man. See you later. Bye.